All right, good evening and welcome back to the Black Robe podcast, everyone. My name is Anzhane Slaughter, and this here is Carol Mitchell.
Yes.
Of course, we got started off on a little rockier foot this evening, but it's all right. We are here and we're ready to go, Carol. Ain't
It
that
was
right?
more than rocky. It was crazy. My co-host, I couldn't find my co-host.
You feel
I was apparently, according to the folks who managed to be on with us, I sounded like something out of the cartoons,
the
but
Alvin
it
and
was
the
all
Chipmunks,
garbled.
yeah.
And you know what I think? I think that what happened tonight happened because I had a 19-hour power outage.
Yeah, let's
And
talk
I
about
think
that.
the whole system that we have set up is like in shock because it was completely without power for 19 hours. I'm surprised that these lights and this computer are not spitting at me right now,
Right.
let alone sounding all garbled.
Well, or maybe
But
I'm just exactly what you needed.
you
It takes the
are.
correct formula to
You are
produce this.
you are my lucky charm. That is for sure. You are my lucky charm, and I'm very glad that you're here
Yes, and
because I don't want to imply that I can do this podcast without you because it just is not the same. And so I'm so glad you're here. We
thank you.
have a lot to talk about, but we're going to do it quickly.
Yes.
Um, and not take too much more time than what we normally would take. So, first of all, what's on your mind tonight that you want to be sure we talk about? And then I have a topic that I want to make sure we talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think what everybody is talking about right now is the Capitol insurrection, right? The crazy Trump supporters. I won't say crazy, but violent, aggressive Trump supporters, and how they took over the Capitol. I think that's on everyone's mind. I think the impeachment coming from the House, how the articles were literally articles of impeachment. The House was writing those up as the people were rioting, you know? So,
Yeah.
I think we should definitely talk about that response that we're seeing from the country and whose fight is this? I think that's something that we as a Black community really need to discuss. I was I follow Clifford Harris, aka Ti, on a lot of his social media,
Oh, you
and
using his government name, huh?
well, he people know him by either or. But he's a strong activist for our community, especially in Georgia. He really did help with a lot of the flipping down there, making it blue. And he made some comments, and so, but I want to pick your brain a little bit, Carol, and see maybe what the older generation thinks, and then maybe we can talk
Oh,
about what us young folks think about this this incident, this event. Yeah.
I'm so excited to be representing the older generation.
Well,
That just brings me so much joy.
yes,
Well,
we got to claim it. Claim it,
well,
Carol.
so we'll talk about the Capitol insurrection and the impeachment because I think there was a lot to unpack around that and a lot of dialogue and themes that came out of it. And then closer to home,
Mm-hmm.
I listened to a press conference January 12th. It was held with the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability and the House Democratic Caucus on Policing and Policy Leadership Team. That press conference and Representative Jesse Johnson, I think he's my new hero. They have quite an aggressive agenda for regulating and restructuring police tactics and equipment, for developing an independent office to do I-940 investigations and even having independent prosecutors appointed so that our local prosecutors don't have to have a conflict of interest, a state level cause of action. Remember, we talked about how one of the deficiencies in I-940 is there's
There's
no
no
cause
teeth.
of action, there's
There's
no
no
basis for a
claim.
lawsuit. Well, they're going to fix that. Um, and the chair of the Public Safety Committee, Roger Goodman, I was impressed with him. Um, he introduced a bill that would decertify a police officer from being able to work in the state of Washington if they are found to have engaged in certain acts. Um, and it expands the grounds under for which they can be decertified so that they can't forum shop. They can't move from Tacoma to Seattle or Seattle to Tacoma with no reporting of their bad acts. So I want to talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
and some of the stories we heard from the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability. It's mostly families that have lost family members to police violence. They were powerful, powerful stories.
Well,
But
I'm
let's
excited
go
to hear
back to
more about those.
January 6th and then we'll get to January 12th. Okay, where it's sort of like one of those days when you ask people, where were you on January 6th,
Right.
2020? It was sort of like the day John F. Kennedy was
Was that?
killed or the
Yeah.
day airplanes flew into the Twin Towers. It's like it crystallizes that moment in your mind and you know exactly where you were at that time. So where were you on January 6th, 2020?
Oh man,
2021.
2021. I was driving around. I was running errands. I remember hearing about it on the radio or whichever podcast I was listening to at the time, but I didn't really, it didn't sink in at that moment. I wasn't in front of a TV, so I didn't have the visuals, which were really scary as I saw them later on. It kind of hurt me in the little bit of patriot, like the little bit of Americanism that is in me, because I am an American. Like, I'm an
A little
African
bit of, you were going to say a
American.
little bit of patriotism that a 24-year-old Black woman has.
Right. It did hurt my soul a little bit, just a little bit of the competitiveness in me, right? This is my country too. I claim that because I have no other country to really claim, right? We all know we were, disconnected from our African roots. So can I claim Nigeria? Do I even know if I'm Nigerian or Kenyan? So America has been my country, of origin. So
Mm-hmm.
I was devastated later on after the fact when I actually saw the visuals. I was watching the ABC News, their 24-hour special on the Capitol insurrection. And it was at that point that it really took place in me. And that probably would have been, after the weekend. I think that was maybe on the 11th or the 12th that it came out. The Hulu special came out, and it's still out there for those who are watching and tuning into the podcast right now. If you haven't seen the ABC News Hulu special, go check it out. It's a
Mm-hmm.
24-hour real time documentary series, basically, where they're interviewing the reporters that were on the grounds reporting it live, right? They're interviewing congressmen and women, Andy Kim. There's numerous, I can't even count, that have some sort of point of view, perspective of this event, right? And so you're seeing all these different viewpoints, and you're seeing from noon that day, right, leading all the way into like 8 p.m., midnight almost. I mean, no, actually, the count didn't happen until like 3 in the morning. So it was a full 24 hours. You saw the lead up, the incitement from Trump, right? Giving the marching orders to tens of
Mm-hmm.
thousands of Trump supporters, right? You see nothing but red hats, and right. So these are with big flags, not only just Trump flags, but Confederate flags. You see the Blue Lives Matter flag, right? The black and white one with the blue strip. You see all these different flags that kind of symbolize white supremacy, or just bold white nationalism, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
Nazis there, right? And so then as I'm watching them actually take down barricades instantly, I'm like, oh, Black people, we could have never got that far. Like, I didn't even have to watch the full first 12 hours to know that these these all white, mainly white. There were some Asian protesters there. I didn't. Maybe you would have found one black person, but really they weren't there for. It was mainly right these white nationalists. Um, and they're just taking over. They're overpowering the Capitol Hill law enforcement, which makes me question where was all the riot gear at the
Oh,
Black Lives Matter protest? Even just at a rally, they have riot gear. There was no police presence during the rally when they're preaching no stop the steal and they're really challenging our democracy. Trump is challenging our democracy right in front and just rallying up all these people. You know, ABC, they did such a great job of lining up the times as the march was happening and the count was happening at the same time. You know, and
mhm.
it was almost in sync. It was almost like
And
like
you're
you
talking about the electoral college votes.
yes,
That
yes.
count was happening,
Hmm.
um, and the certification of those votes. I think to your point about the stark difference between the helicopters and and the armed presence that police had during the Black Lives Matters protests earlier last summer, as opposed to what you saw here, the fact that some of the protesters actually got tours inside. I'm
Oh,
calling them protesters to be nice because that's what they perceive themselves to be.
mhm.
They had guided tours with some of their representatives inside the Capitol building. We also know that they knew the Capitol Police had intelligence, the FBI had intelligence, probably the CIA had intelligence about these groups and what they had planned to do. I saw an article that said that one of their leaders had been arrested several days before and banned from being in DC until his hearing on the matter. He had assault rifles in his possession at the time that he was arrested. And so they knew there was
Oh
enough
yeah.
information that would have led you to believe that there should have been more of a police presence and a more of a police response. And then what do we see? Capitol police officers taking selfies with some of the protesters,
Hmm.
which so the stark difference in the police response, the fact that this crowd was viewed as uh, protesters rather than terrorists, which is what they ultimately are.
Right. That's what they
I,
overtook
and
our
you saw,
capital of the whole country.
yeah,
I mean, that's like if a foreign invader came in and took over our government. That's the same exact visualization that I had, and that's why I was so like, I felt violated. I felt like our country was violated at that point.
I don't think it was any different than what you might have felt during the September 11
Exactly.
assault. And I say that with great respect for those individuals who died that day.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of assault. Some of our members of Congress thought they were going to die that day.
Yes.
Some of them
They,
have come, they've been on Instagram or they've done, email alerts and updates that say that they felt traumatized by what happened that day. They felt under siege, as if, like you said, a foreign invader had come into the Capitol building. So
yeah.
you've got the difference in treatment between nationalists, white nationalist groups, and Black Lives Matters, that ignoring of intelligence that said this was a dangerous situation, and really those folks should have been kept at the perimeter the same way the Black Lives Matters folks were, never should have been allowed anywhere on the Capitol
Yeah.
grounds.
Yeah.
And then you have these stories coming out that suggest that it was an inside job,
It
that
had to
there were
happen.
people in Congress
It had to
fomenting and
happen.
giving tours. And how does Representative Clyburn or House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, how do you know where their offices are if somebody hasn't told you? Those are not that.
Yeah, they
Clyburn's
had a blueprint. They
office
had
is
to have had a
not a
blueprint.
typical stop on a public tour.
Yes.
Somebody had to tell these folks where these offices were.
And even before that, though, there should have been that National Guard presence there. Trump announced this rally back in December that, everybody wait till January 6th. We heard him
Mhm,
say stand by during the presidential debate.
mhm.
There has been this buildup ever since the beginning of his election, honestly, or the beginning that he felt that there was this doubt that he would lose. There's been a buildup to take over. He's not going to take it, right? There's just been resistance the whole way through. So someone that whoever's in charge of the National Guard or getting, that police presence, they dropped the ball. That person
Well,
has to be held
actually,
accountable.
I did. So where I was on the East Coast, I was actually on a flight
Mm-hmm.
from Seattle to Boston as this thing was unfolding. And when we hit the ground, every channel was on this issue,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, and as the whole thing was unfolding, it became really clear from some of the coverage that the National Guard, I think Maryland National Guard, and possibly even Virginia, the governor of Maryland came on television and said, "Hey, I asked the Department of Defense for permission to send the National Guard, and they didn't even call me back."
wow,
So they were complicit in delaying the sending in of the National Guard. It took hours for them
wow.
to get the nod from the Department of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who had to be calling the shots around
Right.
whether they went or whether they didn't go.
Well,
Um,
the president's isn't the president in charge of the guard? Isn't that his?
Certainly of the Department of Defense, but I do like the fact that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all four branches, wrote a joint letter condemning what happened, reaffirming that sedition and insurrection are, in their view, that that's what happened, and that as the military, they stand ready to protect the United States, both foreign and domestic threats. And so now you see you see National Guard sleeping in the White House right now, getting ready because we understand there's going to be another incident coming up January 17th. And some folks say, why January 17th? There have been all these threats at all the major capitals. And so I have, real quickly, because I know we can't talk all night about this.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see the impeachment articles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm it's disturbing that even though there was a noose and a gallows set up for Pence with his name on it, he still feels that he has to be loyal to the president. And I think that might be because he has his own aspirations in 2024. So
Could
maybe
be.
he doesn't want the base to
Politicians
be
are strategic.
too
So
upset, right?
yeah.
So he declined to proceed with the 25th Amendment, which would have removed him as unfit. So I'm glad to see the articles of impeachment, even if the trial itself doesn't happen in the Senate until after January 20th. It will, if he's found guilty, it will mean that he cannot run for office again at a minimum. And possibly, who knows, maybe there will be some jail time, like with the other 80 or so people that they have identified. And Anjane, tell me
Hmm.
this. If you're going to engage in an insurrection and carry a Confederate flag, why would you post that on your Facebook page? And why, if you are a member of a legislature or a police department, would you want your picture to show up there? Are you that arrogant that you think you can be a part of something like that and not have any consequences at all? Two Seattle police officers are on administrative leave right now because they were there participating.
What? Seattle
Yes,
police officers.
there
Oh
were
my
police
gosh.
officers, there were retired military folk, Frankly, I think if you have a retirement benefit or a VA benefit and you were there, you need to lose your government benefit
Hmm.
because you have just committed a crime against the very government that's giving you that check every month.
Yep, I would agree with that.
You have violated your right to receive it. I
Hmm.
also think that, guess what?
What?
I think police officers should be asked when they're under the polygraph exam, have you ever or are you now engaged, affiliated, related in any
Mm,
way to any group which might be considered a hate group, a nationalist group?
yeah,
I think they should be disqualified to serve on the police force if they're affiliated with these groups.
I would say so,
Let's add
right?
that.
Doesn't it
Let's
create
add
a
that to the,
bias? Doesn't
yeah,
those groups create a bias? Now you don't have that, or that law and order perspective. That's you have your personal bias that is, included in there. And honestly, Carol, earlier you asked, is it the arrogance from these people? Why they think that they can just get away with posting these pictures? And I would say partially, yeah, white people are in they abuse that white privilege, okay? And I'm just gonna be honest because a lot of people like to pretend like white privilege isn't real, like it's a myth, like it's something that we just talk about to get affirmative action or more resources, welfare. That's people will throw those narratives out all the time, right? But really, they'll use that disguise and then abuse the privilege and do something like this and try to break in and break and enter into our Capitol building. Um, but then I would also say it's a numbers game. That insurrection, because it was such an inside job, there wasn't enough enforcement to hold down this massive group. And
mhm,
so of course these Capitol law enforcement, if they're gonna stand there, it's probably for their own safety. At this point, they're overpowered, right? I saw a video. Well, actually, it was part of the documentary. It was part of the Hulu special, and it showed, ironically, a black Capitol Hill officer, which would put a whole nother level of fear into myself if I was there, right? Because now I'm one black man against probably 50 white races that are just down on this one hallway,
I
and I'm
saw
trying
that.
to keep them back, right? And the supervisor or whoever the chief of the Capitol Police, they said the job of the Capitol Police officers isn't to protect the building, but to protect the legislators,
Mhm.
right? So the congressmen and women. And so this police officer, he actually did his job by, he wasn't able to retain them, or keep them back, but he directed them away from the
Right,
Congress
right.
doors, and so by doing that, he was actually doing his job. But I mean, could you imagine one?
Uh,
And these are angry people with guns
did you
coming
see
at you,
the one
and
though?
you're unarmed. You're unarmed. The
Right, right.
Capitol Hill, they're unarmed. All they got is a baton. So yeah, you're running away. You're running away from these people at that point. And so, okay, let's just keep the conversation going. We see clearly, right? Black people couldn't get away with something like this, right? We've admitted that this is national terrorism. Like at this point, is it a conversation that the black, because this is going to Ti's point, right?
Hmm.
And he came out and he said on Instagram to his followers, which are mainly black social activists, right? And people, of course, that follow his music. He says, this is a battle between American democracy and their entitled, spoiled child. And
Mm.
it's come to a point where the mom America has to put her foot down and do something. If not, then you're gonna be overturned. He related it to some more hood politics, but basically you got to stand your ground. You cannot.
Hmm.
When are you going to condemn this behavior? And it can't be Trump condemning it a week after the fact, right?
He's
It,
never really condemned it. He's never really, he said, I love you. He
right.
thought what he said to them was appropriate. There's been no
Mhm.
contrition on his part,
Yeah.
none whatsoever. And he
Yeah.
thinks that the impeachment is unfortunate, and he loves the patriots. That's what he's called them,
Mhm.
patriots. I'm wondering though, Anjane, locally.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it locally? Because we live in a part of the country that has a significant, there were some folks, I think one of the people that was killed has ties to this area. She
Wow.
had ties to this area and is
Mhm.
considered a martyr because she died in this protest, right?
Oh my God.
What are we
Yeah.
locally? What's the state of Washington, Pierce County, city of Tacoma? I want to know, what is the plan for dealing with these groups? They have been raising their ugly heads for
Mhm.
years now, flexing their muscle, making comments, showing up with guns. We had a member of the county council, probably two. They were known for walking into the county city building packing. What did we do? Not a thing. There
Yeah.
has to be some sort of a response. And that's why I'm really happy, real quickly, to talk about this policing policy legislative agenda, because that's part of the answer. Part of
Mhm.
the answer is around how police interact with certain communities. You saw the
Mhm.
difference between the police response to this group as opposed to Black Lives Matters. I mean,
Right.
everybody with eyesight could see that glaring
Yeah, with eyesight,
disparity
right? If
in
you're
the
not
response.
blind, you can see.
Nobody
Yeah.
could ignore that.
Yeah.
But I just want to real quickly talk about Representative Jesse Johnson. Uh, there are a couple House bills that you and I are going to keep our eye on. House Bill 1054.
Mhm.
It's going to regulate and restrict some police tactics and equipment like chokeholds, neck restraints, tear gas, no knock warrants. These things sound familiar?
Yep.
Military equipment, police dogs, vehicle pursuits, none of which happened during the Capitol insurrection,
Of
I
course not.
might
Like we
add.
didn't even have that. Where were those resources? Where were the rubber
Apparently,
bullets? Why would we have to ban? We don't even use rubber bullets.
no police dogs, no
No.
military
Oh
equipment,
my God.
none of it happened. And it also would impose a statewide requirement that you de-escalate first, and that there's a duty of care that officers have to honor, and deadly force becomes a last resort. So you first have to try to de-escalate, and that it'll be a statewide standard for every policing entity. Now, they're going to be fussing about it. There'll be some negotiating around that.
Yeah.
There was some
Something will get
objection.
taken out.
Hmm.
But where are the teeth, Carol? Where's the enforcement in that bill? Is there any sort of, if they violate this, then they are removed and all benefits?
Well,
You
that's
know.
where I think House Bill 1082, that's Goodman, who is the chair of the Public Safety Committee, House Public Safety
Mhm.
Committee. He wants to completely reorganize the Criminal Justice Training Center, including adding more community members to its oversight. But he wants to change the basis for which you can decertify police officers. So if they commit certain violations, they're going to expand the list of things that would cause you to be decertified, and you'd be decertified in the state. You can't, maybe you can go to Idaho or go to
Yeah,
Mississippi,
you have to go to another state. Yeah.
but you would not be able to work as a police officer in the state of Washington. Um, Representative Leland Ty is also sponsoring a state level cause of action for violating constitutional rights. So you don't have to make out a federal case. There will be a state law that prevents you from violating the state constitution and give you a basis for a claim. So the way we were talking about how Manny's family didn't really have a cause of action because they violated I-940, well, Representative Ty is trying to fix that.
Oh, good. So
Representative
there's no
Inson,
way that we can kind of combine the. I mean, is there a way you can write into the law that to have the claim or the enforcement written into that law, right? So if we talk about the police accountability bill that Representative Johnson's working on, you know, would there be a way that we can add an article into that bill to say, because I mean, where
Instead of
is the
having
penal
five
code?
articles, you're saying let's have one comprehensive bill.
Well, not a comprehensive bill, but I would like to see like consequences for actions included in all of these bills. Because if we just put the law there, okay, and then they break the law, okay, well the law is just broken.
Hmm.
Is that it? Like, then we have to go to trial. We have to, if these people aren't even indicted, half the time. So where can we put the enforcement on the law enforcement,
Hmm.
to say there's not even a question if your department wants to do it. It's the law. This is what
Right.
happens.
Well, I think Intamin's two. She has two bills. One that would establish this independent investigatory office, a state office, and independent prosecutors who would investigate complaints or allegations of misconduct and who would not be tied to your local police departments at all. It'd be a state office, don't have the conflicts, unless, of course, it's the state patrol, right? Then you might have
Right.
one. Um, but they would investigate deaths in custody and accusations of, guess what, sexual assault, girl, because
Mm-hmm.
apparently that's a problem too. So I think between the cause of action, the civil cause of action, so families can sue for violation of civil rights, between the chance that you'll be decertified and not able to work in the state of Washington, and then the fact that violation of Johnson's proposal, um, the de-escalation standards and just outlawing outright some of these
Yeah.
deadly force tactics, that means you
Mm-hmm.
just stop doing it. And if you're caught doing it, it's an immediate opportunity for a cause of action, or it's an immediate opportunity for decertification. You want to lose
Mm.
your career? Okay, engage in this behavior. But
Yeah.
it's all going to be negotiated. The police unions, the police and sheriff's associations, everybody's going to have their bite at that apple. So it'll be watered, all of these will be watered down somewhat, but at
Mm.
least there is a strong legislative agenda from the House side. Don't know yet what the Senate is doing for police accountability. So let's just pay attention to that and hope to see some change coming.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. I'm glad to hear that they started out, ready to go. I mean, January 11th was the first day of session, right? And so
Yeah, January
they
12th, they had their first
go.
hearing. The
Mm-hmm.
morning of January 12th at 8 o'clock. I mean, they were on it.
Yeah.
I did want to mention the families that testified and were part of the press conference. Everybody should go watch that
Mm.
and listen to mostly the mother. Well, I think in a couple cases there were mothers who lost their children, cousins. Manny Ellis's name came up. The family wasn't on the at the press conference, but of course his death came up also as an example of why we need these laws. And we should pay attention to what happens. House Bill 1054, House Bill 1082. I didn't get the bill numbers for Representative Intiman, but we can show those, and Representative Ty. You and I can maybe keep people updated on how that's going. You can use your legislative experience, the
Yeah, that
background.
sounds like.
Yes. So
Yep, we sure will.
let's close off this discussion again. It's been an interesting year already. I know where I was on January 6, 2021. You were riding around in a car, and I was in a
Yeah.
cross country flight. Um,
Mhm.
but the good news is that our congressional delegation from Washington, that no one was killed,
Yes.
although a few came down with COVID, and all of them will probably be traumatized at some level and
Yeah.
nervous. It was a rocky start to a new year.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that January 20th will go off without any foolishness, any such foolishness, that we'll see a
Let's hope.
local plan for how we're going to address these kinds of hate groups here in Pierce County, in Tacoma, in Washington State. And you and I will be
Yeah.
part of talking about it.
Yeah, we sure will. And the message I want to close out with to, anyone, everyone, any and everyone that's listening, um, it was a numbers game, the Capitol insurrection, right? But it's not a numbers game that we, unfortunately, as a Black community, have the right to play in. So, and it's clear we know this, right? I just want to just repeat it, right? That this is not something that we should get ourselves involved in. We have police brutality issues that we need to really be focusing on here locally, right? We need to try to prevent measures like this and really start working on equity, in our state. Let's get rid of this white privilege. Let's hold these, arrogant, nationalists accountable, right? But let's not try to mimic or duplicate what they did. I just want
Mhm.
to say that piece because one, it's not the Martin Luther King way to do it. It's definitely not the peaceful way. I don't. It's not. It's not. It's not. It's just not in our nature.
Mhm.
We are way more organized of a people. To really walk down that path. So that's the message I want to put out there. Right. Let's
Uh,
let's get
uh,
back to the social justice and the police
yes,
accountability.
yes,
We'll,
and if you don't like the way things are going, then get engaged in legislation, right? Change the
mhm,
law. Don't show up at the county city building with a gun in your pocket trying to
yeah.
threaten your leaders with deadly force. Change the law. Change who leads, right? Use your power of vote to change who is leading and who is making decisions. But in allowing these armed militia to just show up and take matters into their own hands, that to me, a governmental entity that allows that to happen is complicit because
Yep.
you encourage it, you don't respond to it, you don't
Well,
do anything to
you're standing
prevent
by,
it,
you're watching it.
you
Now you're
allow
an
people to
accomplice.
hide behind the Second Amendment, BS, all of that.
Hmm.
And now
Yeah.
we see that there has to be a line drawn between protesting and insurrection. Hopefully, our local leaders will draw that line just as clearly. I think the governor did so, put the fencing up, put the National Guard out there, and said, "No, you are not coming on. You're not coming on the grounds, not today." So we'll see what happens on January 17 and 20. But this is a time for being watchful and
Hmm.
prayerful.
Yep, that's right. And we got Martin Luther King's birthday coming up.
Yes,
Okay, so we'll be celebrating that soon, and then February is just right around the corner.
yes, it
Black
is.
History Month. So let's
Yes, I'm
let.
looking forward to that.
Yep, me too.
All right, my dear. You do
Alrighty,
you
well
do
that's it,
well.
guys. Thank you again for tuning in, despite any sort of technical difficulties in the beginning. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next Thursday. All
Yep.
right.
All right. Bye.
Bye.